Hello my bitches, bros, and non-binary hoes, and welcome to a little Minecraft building video. Now I was asked by about 4 or 5 people in about 24 hours about how I build in Minecraft, or if I could teach them how to build in Minecraft. So this is a little video for that, for those people that were in my Twitch chat and my friends, my sister specifically. So this one's for you, CJ. They wanted to know kind of my tips for building, how I build, the things that I do, and how I just how I build. So I put together kind of a list of 5 tips, ranking from least important, I think, to my most important tip for how I build in Minecraft. And starting with my least important tip, it's to find a build palette that you like. Now, looking through the area here that I have built in, you can definitely see what the base core of my build palette is, and that would be cobblestone, spruce, and stone brick. Those are present in every single build that I do, and everything else is extra detailing from building to building. But those are the most consistent pieces everywhere. It's spruce, stone brick, and cobble. And everything else has been based around that in the specific area that I have built. At least a few things around here were not my own builds, or were only partially mine. But they all have the same sort of build palette, and I think that's really important for keeping a consistent feel to an area, is to find a base palette that you really like, and then to work with that and move forward with that. Now, my number 4 tip is plants. Plants add a lot of color and detail and some visual interest and depth. And they fill in gaps where you otherwise might not have room for something else very well. This filled in a very nice long gap. This filled in some really tiny ones. Those filled in some like more medium-sized gaps. These plants, these are glowberries and sweet berries, and they just kind of added a little bit more to the walls out here, where otherwise they would look pretty flat. And they add just color and life, and I think in Minecraft that's hard to avoid. Minecraft is a very sort of plant-filled game, and also make little builds that are entirely just based around plants sometimes too. I have this little potato farm over here, which has been unfortunately trampled a little. I have this over here that's for just for some potatoes, because I think the potatoes in my texture pack are adorable. They have little flowers, and I think that that's just the cutest. The plants add a lot to a Minecraft world, in my opinion. And you can see I have a glowberry farm over here, and my wheat farm, and some tiny farm for carrots, beetroot, and more potatoes. And the trees. The trees aren't intentional; they were just left there. But the plants are really important. They line the windows. They come up the side of this bookshop. Plants add a lot of color and a lot of visual interest to your builds. And that brings me to my 3rd tip, which is inherently of itself visual interest. Now, what I mean by this is depth and shape and color. Now, on the bookshop here, we have a good example of the wool awnings, adding a little bit of color. And I know that they're black and white, but they add a color difference from the rest of the build, which would otherwise be a very rather flat palette of the spruce and the stone brick. And the leaves add some color in as well. And now what I mean with depth, you can see here on the corner I've used stone brick walls in conjunction to the stone brick to add a little bit of depth. And you'll see this on a lot of my builds in this area. You'll see it on here and the farms down there. I think it's a good thing that just adds a little bit of depth to corners, because corners can sometimes look a little flat on our builds. And you can also bring corners out like I did on the farms over here. A little bit of kind of like scaffolding around the edge of the building to add some depth where there otherwise might not be. And that doesn't always work. Sometimes the sides of our builds don't always line up, so I will sometimes do Something a little like this that looks a little funny up close, but just adds a little bit of depth from a distance so that it does not look so flat. Shape is also very important, and shape is something I run into with roofs a lot, because roofs are one of the most hardest things that I have. I struggle with roofs. I struggle even just talking about them. But as you see here, kind of with this blacksmith shop, I added some visual interest to the roof by giving the awning that comes down a different width than the rest of the roof. Now the patio also has a different width from the rest of the building, but that's a very important detail in adding some shape to a build that would otherwise look very, very flat. And you can see here with the potion shop roof as well, we have sort of a T shape. And that's very important for adding some visual interest as well. Now this shop roof was just a corner. It did just turn and go straight around, but then that looked a little too flat and samey around this back end, so I just brought the front through to the back, made the roof larger, and it all turned out a lot better. It all turned out looking much nicer and less boring. And you can see as well on this really big build that I'm still working on over here, it has an absolutely gigantic roof. So some of the ways that I went about breaking up the shape of this roof was in the block pattern I used here. It goes up by 2 for most of it, and then I switch into a 1-2, and then just into a 1 the rest of the way up. What I also did was I outlined the 2 basic edges with dark prismarine, because I think dark prismarine goes with copper very well, and it added a little bit more color, a little more interest. Something else I did is because I had some weird corners on this building, so to keep the roof from just extending all the way out and being really long and really flat, well, as long and flat as it otherwise would have been, I added a sort of smoothing rounding of the corner on this roof, and I brought it over as an additional little awning that's slightly smaller than the larger one, and it adds a little bit of depth. And on the back, I added 2 more of these pop-out windows that match up with the ones in the front to give the back a little bit more to it, so that it's not just straight flat copper. And I might add a 3rd pop-out window here in the middle. I haven't decided yet. I'm still working on this build. This is massively under construction yet. As you can see, it is pretty empty on the inside yet. Just like me. But that's something I'm still working on, is adding another pop-up roof there maybe, or something else, maybe another tower to match up with the ones in the front. I think it might look a little odd on the back, but you never know until you try it. Worst case scenario, you just fix it. But depth, shape, and visual interest are some of the most important things for you to do. Another way to do that, and I see this pretty often, is actually with fence posts. Is with fence posts. I used them here in favor of the stone brick walls because it added a little bit of a color difference on what would otherwise be a very tall space to use that in without a lot of breaking it up. That's very important, is if you're going to do something like using the walls in the corners, you need to break it up. These are broken off into different sections on there, and that's the same for the rest of the walls on this build. And I used it down here, and you can see, oh no, those are stairs. Stairs are actually another good way to do that. Add some depth. But again, any kind of block that does not have the full block shape will add some good depth. And color is really important, because otherwise this tall bit wouldn't have had a lot of color otherwise, and the fence posts tie in with the fence posts on the windows then. Now, my second most important tip is do not use what does not work for you. When you're going through build tip videos and how I build videos and all this yada 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 and all that, if me talking about using, you know, stone brick walls on my corners doesn't resonate with you, don't use it. Toss that out. You don't have to do that at all, by any means. People will give a lot of tips and a lot of advice of, oh, you should do this to make your build look good, do this to make your build look good. Do not use what does not work for you. I don't use what does not work for me. And one of the things that doesn't work for me is texturing. I'm gonna go back to the round back of the bookshop here to kind of talk about what I mean there. Is when faced with a big flat wall like this, which I did not decorate because this was just the back, and I didn't know if I was adding anything back here yet. So I didn't add anything to the back of this bookshop that made it visually interesting. So it was just one big slab of stone brick. And now a lot of people, and they would carry this around to the rest of the build as well, the rest of the walls would take things like mossy stone brick. Hold on, excuse me. The stone brick family is quite varied. Actually, let's just look at stone. They would take mossy stone brick or cracked stone brick, chiseled stone brick. Probably not chiseled, but things like cracked, mossy. Get rid of the space, and that'll actually help a little bit. They would bring in just stone, maybe cobblestone and mossy cobblestone. Things like that, they'd bring it in and texture it with different blocks within the same family. I don't like doing this. I don't like doing it. I think it doesn't look very good. It looks too busy. Looks kind of messy sometimes. I feel like I can never do it in a good way. Some people definitely can, but that's not something that I am particularly interested in doing in my builds, especially because I tend to use depth to add that interest anyway. I don't really leave a lot of my walls large and flat. Or otherwise they have patterns in them, like with the clock tower. But I don't usually leave a lot of walls large and flat. Now we're gonna go fly over to the one example where I did use texturing like that to give just another look at what I'm talking about. I've only done this in one build, and it was over here. It was because that was specifically what was requested of me over here. I built this for another member of the server, for what she wanted her house over here to look like. Let me see, it's slowly loading in. I kind of lag as I go over here. As I loaded more chunks, but we can see kind of what I mean, where I use some texturing here with red wool and red concrete and the red mushroom blocks, where I did some texturing here, and this looks much more flat on the vanilla textures. They aren't as harsh of shades against one another, I believe, in the vanilla textures as they are in my texture pack. I don't know, but I did that here, and the only reason I think that it works here is because this is supposed to look kind of like a fantasy cottage out in the woods. You know, kind of a fancy little mushroom cottage, and it's got the moss as well, so I think it looks more like a patchwork blanket, and I think it works in its favor here, but otherwise I wouldn't normally do this. I don't normally think that this looks very good. I still don't think that this looks very good, but it's what my friend wanted, so I obliged. And I think it worked in its favor. I think it kind of looks much more like a fantasy quilt. But otherwise, I would not normally do texturing with multiple blocks like that. I don't like the way that that looks. That's just my personal opinion. I see that tip handed out a lot, is to do that with your builds, and I just don't like it. I just don't like it. So just don't do what doesn't work for you. Texturing doesn't work for me like that. But adding depth and visual interest through color and shape works a lot more in my favor. And then when it would come to texturing walls like that, a lot of the time it would be really hard to do, like specifically with the front of the bookshop. It would make the front of the bookshop look too busy, because I have the big windows and the wool awnings and these little balconies and another little window and the plants, and adding too many other bricks into this mix as like just texturing the walls, I think wouldn't make it look very good. I don't think it would look very good. So just don't do what doesn't work for you specifically. Now my last and most important tip, now again, this is my most important tip, is to use reference. Use reference. Copy other people's builds. Don't steal other people's builds. Don't like copy someone's build and say, hey, look what I made, you know, all on my own. I came up with this entirely on myself, but it's a one-to-one recreation of somebody else's Instagram post. Don't do that. Obviously, that's a dick move. But copy, use reference. This build I've been working on stream, and my Twitch chat has been able to see. I've had up in the top right corner of my stream a tab that shows the reference that I'm currently looking at while I'm building. So my stream can see kind of what I'm looking at while I build, what I take from my reference, what I leave, what I like, what I don't like. But use reference. Absolutely 100% use reference. And I'm going to come back to the bookshop for this as well. Because the bookshop, the majority of this, I believe, was just ripped from an Instagram post that I saw. This is at the base someone else's build, and I will admit that. I'll admit that. I did not come up with this entirely on my own. I added the things like the walls in the corners, and obviously I decorated the inside. But for the most part, the shape of the bookshop, and I believe the majority of it, was just from an Instagram post that I saw, including the plants up the sides. The plants up the sides with the trapdoors. I think that was part of the same bookshop post. It might have been something different where I also added it to this. But I believe that was all from the same post. But yeah, no. And the clock tower was also not entirely my design either. I believe I changed up the build palette a little bit on it as I was doing it, and obviously I had to decorate the inside on my own. But no, this was not 100% on its own, just my build and my things. And I think it's really important when you're learning how to build to copy and reference other people's builds. Look at what you think looks good and add that to your own shit. Add that to your own shit. That's what's gonna look good to you. If it already looks good to you as someone else's build, it's gonna look even better to you as your own build. So copy, reference, practice. Practice, practice, practice. This is part of practicing. Very little around here is entirely 100% my own original idea. I would struggle to point out something where I didn't use at least some level of reference. Even the farms where the outside casing is entirely my own build. The inside farm I had a reference from somebody else because I like redstone and things. The cactus farm isn't really redstone. The pumpkin farm is redstone. I like redstone and things, but I'm bad at setting it up, so I had to reference that at least from somebody else. And then I just slapped my own outside casing on it. And I think this big square base that started the entire area, this is like a reference of like 5 or 6 builds. I'm pretty sure I referenced the farms off of somebody. No, the farms I came up with on my own. Because I remember the world, yeah, the farms I came up with on my own. Because I remember the world where I was testing out what shape I wanted to use and what sizing I wanted to use. So the farms I came up with on my own. But that little building, and this tower, and the big square itself, and the dent that comes off to make the sheep farm, very little of that I came up with on my own. The detailing and the texture I did entirely on my own. The inside I did entirely on my own. The outside shapes, I copied. I referenced. And there is nothing wrong with that. Good artists steal. I believe is the quote. Good artists steal. And this build specifically, I've been ripping from 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 references. Both for the inside and the outside. But for the most part, I've just been taking what I like and putting it together and slapping it together. Very little of what I do comes straight out of my own mind. And I know there's going to be some people who are like, oh, well, that's not right. That's not good Minecraft building. And you know what? I can promise you that they all build really bad looking squares. They all build really bad looking squares. Maybe not all of them, but they have a bad attitude. Their attitude is a bad looking square. So yeah, just take what works for you and use it. And reference other people's builds, reference the things that they do. Instagram is great for this. Google is great for this. Other YouTubers are great for this. A lot of people make, build idea videos for a reason. Rip off them. Rip them off. Just don't claim it entirely 100% as your own. I won't do that for any of this. Any of this? Nah, nothing. None of this was original. None of it. Maybe the lampposts. I'm sure I copied the lamppost from somebody somewhere along the way, but this is just inherently how I do them now. But yeah. Just, reference, borrow, copy. And don't use what doesn't work for you Find visual interest and depth, you know, patterns, colors, shapes, mix and match. Don't go too crazy with it though, because then it'll just be too busy and look bad. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. You can do whatever you want. And plants add a lot of color and visual interest, I think. I made them a separate point, but they do tie in to visual interest and depth and shape. But I made them a separate point because I believe that they are very important to have separately. And at the base core, flat baseline, just find a build palette that you like. I really like spruce. I used to use dark oak a lot. I've always used stone bricks. I've always really liked stone bricks. I used to use dark oak a lot, and now I almost always use spruce. Spruce supremacy. I use birch now and again too, actually. I know, blasphemous. But yeah, just do what works for you and reference. I think it can be summed up like that. Do what works for you and reference. And so that's going to be all from me today in this video. If you liked, make sure to like and subscribe. That lets me know, well, at least like the video if you liked it. That lets me know that people like looking at things like these. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing with my YouTube channel. So if you like this, go ahead and leave a like. Subscribe if you think you want to see more. Go follow my Twitch as well. It will be linked in the description if you want to see me work on this fucking beast live on Twitch. You can tell me how shit it looks. I hate the front more and more. The more I look at it, I hate that so much. But yeah, follow me on Twitch. Hang out with me there. I'm live every Tuesday and Thursday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central Standard, I believe. And you can join the Discord as well. You'll be notified whenever I go live. You can add into the conversation that happens there. And yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And I hope to see you again, maybe in something more like this. Bye. Have a nice day.